Okay. Well, first of all, I'm just going to say hello to people because we just are live. Hello, everybody. We are still having a little bit of difficulties, technical difficulties, so we're going to deal with that and get back to you in a couple of minutes. Sorry for that. Please be patient, and we will come back soon.
Okay. Yes. Wendy, you are sideways.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to give a background.
Can she send her good email address to them so they can resend?
I asked her to email Sasha direct, so she should be able to do that. Yeah, she has just sent an email to Sasha, so Sasha can reply to that one. And also I have to look for Pat. I guess we'll be starting soon.
So I asked Sasha to respond to Sophie's email. Sasha is speaking with Sophie right now, so she should be getting very soon.
Okay, very good.
Okay, good.
And you said there's a fourth person as well, Pat?
Yes, that's Pat. I'm trying to locate her. And if you need to start, then I will just be with you very quickly. Just make sure that she is okay.
Oh, okay, Pat is getting in there as well.
Good, I guess good. Hey, excellent.
Oh, yes, thank you. So we officially begin this.
Yes.
So thank you for being there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second National Asian Heritage Month Symposium. Before we begin, I would like to mention that Festival Asia recognizes that all its activities are located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kinikaha people, who are the traditional custodian of the land and the waters on which we gather today. Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nation, and today a place of life for diverse Aboriginal population and other people. The work that we do on behalf of the Festival Asia is from the perspective of honoring, protecting, and sustaining this land and its people who were first on this territory. We strive to go behind just acknowledging the land and wave in indigenous knowledge, share principles, and invite you to move beyond the acknowledgement and into the action. So my name is Khosrow Barahmandi. I'm the artistic director of the Festival Asia. I'm honored today to have a group of people from Vancouver who are also parts of the Asian Heritage Month Society of the Vancouver. It's such a great pleasure to receive all of you here. Since we are four of you and I don't have the bios of all of you, I prefer in that case to let you present yourself each individually and talk about the commitments that you have regarding your communities. The talk that today is going to be presented is regarding the storytelling through food. And so please begin, Winnie, by presenting yourself and your colleagues.
Great. Thank you very much, Khosrow. So it's been almost 10 years since we did the first national symposium. Yes. Well, thank you very much for having us here. Today I'm joined by three of my colleagues from PCHC, Museum of Migration Society. So PCHC stands for Pacific Canada Heritage Center, Museum of Migration Society. And now we have, first of all, I'd like to introduce our president, Wendy Yip. She is really quite a force on her own, very capable person. And we were so happy that she joined our board and provides the leadership to a very energetic board and very diverse one. And so without much ado, I turn it over to Wendy first.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to join today. We're very excited. Bonjour, tous les amis, parce que j'ai grandi à Montréal, alors c'est un plaisir d'être ici. I just first wanted to also say, since we're hailing from the West Coast, that we wanted to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of the nations of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam in Vancouver. From those three nations are the ones who are graciously hosting us in the city of Vancouver. So we appreciate them. And what I wanted to say is that I have been very inspired by Winnie, who is just 10 times more than any of else on the board in terms of.
I know this from Montreal event. She's all over the, everybody knows.
Yeah,
her.
No, it's fantastic. And so
yeah.
we just follow in her little footsteps, and I was just very impressed at her work, but also the mission and the vision of Pacific Canada Heritage Centre and the Museum of Migration Society. Many of us may know that there is the Pier 21 Museum of Migration in East Coast in Halifax, and I've been there, and it's very lovely, but it doesn't tell the full story. And so PCHC started about, I guess about 11 years ago now, with a dedicated set of volunteers, and it's still all pretty much volunteer driven. They basically said, we need to tell the full story of Canada. We need to understand our migration, our immigration and our migration in the West Coast, in Pacific Canada. And partly it is to acknowledge the many people who have crossed the Pacific Ocean and they've entered here at the West Coast and may have eventually moved over to the East Coast. Also, we want to acknowledge the people then who moved from the East Coast over to the West Coast. And also, of course, we wanted to acknowledge that we have this very interesting relationship with the First Nations, and that they have been here in the land for 9,000 to 10,000 years. Through carbon dating, they've established that. And so we are using this opportunity to explore our relationships with our hosts, particularly in British Columbia, where none of the land absolutely is not ceded. There was never any treaty. So it's been a very engaging process, I think, since we've had the apology and the start of reconciliation. But we also realize that it's really about all the migration that we are all engaged in, whether from even within the First Nations having to be displaced, and then also making their ways from maybe traditional backgrounds to urban centers. And so we share this experience, and it's very important to capture it and to learn from each other's experiences. So without further ado, I just wanted to say a little bit more that we have the two components. One is preserving the heritage, and that is where probably we intersect a lot with many of the organizations who are participating in the symposium, is that we're trying to capture a little bit of maybe our parents, maybe ours, maybe our grandparents' heritage, because we do know that we are living in the mosaic of Canada with, multiple cultures that have infused our national conversation and sets of values. And we also, as I said, want down the road to be a museum of migration. But more important than to have the building is to have the content. And so we are really focused right now on how to make sure that we can preserve these stories, particularly as the older generations, are, they're getting older, they're dying, and they may not have passed on all the stories. And we are lucky that we are at a moment where we have the technology to help capture some of these things and to preserve it in a fashion that can be shared. And so that you will hear a little bit about this as we go further. With that, I just wanted to cede the floor back to Winnie, who's been with the organization from the beginning and can tell you a little bit about the very successful programming that has been done when we could meet physically. And that's just one part. So over to Winnie.
I think I'm on now. Okay, great. So the topic of our presentation today is about connecting Asian Canadians through food and storytelling. And that is an approach we find which is creating a very high comfort level for people who are not familiar with each other to share something very, very personal, such as their own family story, their migration, and their history. In the last 8-9 years, we have been trying different kind of programming ideas. And back in 2015, it was Henry Yu, who was on the board, who started this idea. He said, well, what about a banquet of stories? Now, he didn't go into the details. It's just an idea in his head. So a few of us just took that away and we tried to visualize what it would look like. So we aim at having about 80 people in the room and have different hosts telling stories and sharing food. So there's a lot of involvement, everybody participating there. They are both listeners to other stories as well as people who are sharing something from their own culture in the form of food and then their stories. It was amazing. It turned out to be so good, people wanted us to do it again. So that was 2015. Over 100 people were there, even though we aim at about 80. 120 turned up. And because we were testing so many other storytelling formats and ideas and reaching out to many, many different groups, we didn't want to repeat that until there is another time. So in 2019, because of all the work that we have been doing in one historical neighborhood, and that is Strathcona in Vancouver. So we want to build upon the relationships that we have with the pioneer communities there, as well as to really discover a bit more about the neighborhood and the history, and bring in the newcomers, the smaller groups, the younger groups, which might not know the stories, the missing stories of Canada. So we tried that, and over 200 people showed up. And it was not just for Asians either, because the idea is that we want to tell our stories to as wide a group as possible. And so we have Muslim and Jewish and Dukable, as well as the pioneer groups whose stories were not well known, the Indo-Canadians, today we say South Asians, as well as the Japanese, the Chinese, and also the newer groups like Afghanistan and people from the smaller countries and less well-known countries in the last 2 decades. So at this point, I will just stop and invite Sophie to get ready to share some of the images or even clips from either of those 2 years.
Winnie, would you like to present Sophie first so people get to know her as well? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, so when Sophie is ready, she can play, but while she's still getting it up, I just want to say that we're so happy to have Sophie working with us, first as an intern, now she is a coordinator for us, working on a part-time basis. And before her sister was the one that I lean on doing the 2015 Banquet of Stories. So there's that continuity. Sophie, are you ready?
Yes, sorry, I just had to reload it very quickly, but here we go. It's my pleasure to join all of you. Sorry, I had a bit of technical difficulties getting on, but now all's well.
And then over time during the Second World War and various things, and afterwards even, the hall changed and the Croatians sold it to the Russian community, and that's a very wide body of Russians. But anyway, it became their sort of home base, and so it's remained so ever since.
It's very important to hear the stories because they're not only historic stories, they're also stories of the current time. People who have immigrated here from other places, like so many other places, Vietnam, Philippines, from Russia, from, there are so many different places people have come to Canada and have settled in this community. So we're very happy to share those stories.
Sophie, are you getting something else up?
Yes, I am. I'm just.
So in that case, I can fill in. Oh, you're ready. All right. You will speak to it?
Yeah. So we had quite a diverse amount of people at the Banquet of Stories. And we also thought it was important to be very intergenerational. So here you can see the Jewish Museum and Archives of BC, their table. So Harry Hammer, who's an elder in the Strathcona community, as well as Emily Glass, who we also coordinated with for the cross-cultural walks. So she gave a portion of the tour. And here they are sharing some traditional foods that they grew up with, like that's kosher salami and herring and whatnot. So yeah, it was really great to have people from very different generations, but who can share in the same cultural experiences. And here we have the Liu family, as well as their representative from the Southeast Asian Canadian Heritage Society. So Cheung was very excited to have his parents be part of this, as were they, and he acted as a translator for a lot of it, as they shared their delicious Vietnamese spring rolls. And here we have Pat in purple, who is one of our directors, who'll be sharing more of her story later, as well as her husband, as well as the Filipino table, where they shared some of their really delicious food as well. And here we have, so Terry Hunter in the center, he is part of the Heart of the City Festival, which is what Banquet of Stories was put on the 14th annual one in 2019. As well as our past president, Tinika, as well as Yossi and her friend, who were a part of the Indonesian table. So as you can see, it was a very diverse amount of people, and it was really great to hear about their cultural experiences as well as their family histories. And the food is also obviously a great perk in all of that. Winnie?
Yes. So you finished?
Yes.
You are done?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to also point out that the purposes of these events is really devoting an afternoon to building community. It's so important that people have that chance to really interact. And in 2015, the most moving things that we've heard was somebody came to us afterwards and said, I've been here for 30 years in Canada, but I never had the chance to share a meal sitting at a table with people from another culture. So that was really gratifying for us to to know that we've created a chance people feel comfortable doing that. And some friendships were made that way. Then in 2019, because we opened it up, having a bigger room, and we had more than 10 tables at each long table, that's about 6-foot table, 6-foot long tables. We would have more than one storyteller, sometimes from different groups. And so at first, when we try to conceive of the idea, we wonder whether it will be impossible to do when the noise level can be really high. But we even managed to capture some of the images and stories on video. And so today we won't be able to show you a lot, but I will ask Sophie to give you the link to our YouTube channel, where you will see 3 videos from 2015. And in the future, we'll be also making 2019 available. The idea of sharing with you is that some of you may be doing some fantastic work in the same area. We want to learn from you, but also we like to share the model that we have done. And maybe once we're back to more normal times, then we can work with you no matter where you are. And we can have all these different banquets everywhere throughout the country. And our agenda is that when we can build this movement, people are comfortable sharing stories. They start to find their own stories from their elders. Then PCHC will stand to gain, because we are on the lookout for good stories and for people who will be able to share with us some of these missing pieces. And the idea in the end is to build a more inclusive narrative of how Canada's history should look. And so on that note, I'm going to introduce another colleague, or I ask Wendy to introduce Pat, who will be telling you, because of the pandemic, how our board tried to shift gears and come up with a different idea to continue our work.
Hi again. So Pat, if Pat does not share a picture of her, you have to go onto our website, which I just sent the link on that. And if you look at the list of directors, you will be able to see Pat, actually, a very friendly face. And so Pat, I should say the common theme for many of the people is, like Winnie included, and Pat, they come with an education background. Winnie worked at UBC before she retired, and then devoted her considerable skills to PCHC and several other things around the city. And Pat was a business education teacher, and then a school librarian, teacher librarian. And so she's got a wealth of education from kindergarten through university, and is also doing some personal investing. But she basically picked up the challenge to think about how to go into presenting her story virtually. Because of course, in March, the pandemic hit and everybody had to hunker down. And we're like, well, what are we gonna do? Because usually it's all about events where we can meet face to face. But luckily we have this technology. And so we did all our board meetings. We started going to Zoom, Skype, and then we talked about how we could possibly use the Zoom format to do some webinars. And I don't know if we have that opportunity. Maybe we'll do it a little bit later. But we basically had one of our other board directors, Henry Yu, many of you know, who's a very talented and wise history teacher, and with his students has basically looked at all sorts of media to help capture storytelling. And he gave us gave a little seminar on storytelling and how to use your iPhone or other things to capture, maybe interview stories with your family. But I just wanted to sort of get that to set the framework. So I will then transfer over to Pat, who really didn't think of herself as having a migration story to tell. So that we'll let Pat pick up from there.
That's true. Well, thank you, Sophie, for putting this slide up. And I'm very happy to be here today at the second National Asian Heritage Month Symposium. And last year, I was very pleased to become a director with the Pacific Canada Heritage Centre Museum of Migration. I grew up in Surrey, British Columbia, and since back in the 60s and 70s, and since then there's been so much more visibility of Asians and First Nations, and congratulations to the organizing team and volunteers of this symposium. Thank you very much for doing this. During our PCHC-MoM meetings, this idea of gathering the migration stories started, and my understanding was that it was our homework to create our own migration story. So as Wendy said, I was at a loss. I was born here. My parents were both born here. I never saw myself as a migrant, and I don't think my parents did either. So how was I going to create a migration story if I wasn't a migrant? So I had to think about it. And then I thought about my ancestors who came over from China, and they migrated, and they are the reason why I'm here. And so that was the beginning of my migration story. Next slide. Sophie? Anyway, you can see the tiny pictures on the left. No, not that one, the one before. Thank you. I decided to create a video. Can you go back one, Sophie? Video about my ancestors migrating to Canada, and found it to be a really great way to learn more about my ancestors. And the tiny picture you'll see in the center is my great-grandfather. He's the first one that came over to Canada in the 1880s. He was about 30, he worked on the Canadian Pacific Railway. Then my paternal grandparents actually came to Canada twice. Thank you, Sophie. My paternal grandfather was kind of cut off, and my paternal grandmother came twice. The first time when they were single, and the second time when they were married with kids. So I don't know, can we see the whole slide, Sophie? At age 5, my paternal grandmother came, and she was a servant to a family that was living in Powell River on Vancouver Island. My grandfather came over at age 21, and his wife had just died in childbirth, and he came over to join his father. So they met together through a matchmaker, and they married when my grandmother was in her late teens and my grandfather was in his late 20s. And perhaps it was because the Chinese people were so unwelcome, and they felt that they had to go back to China. And so they took their 4 children back to China, and the kids got really sick. They weren't used to the water there, and then maybe the atmosphere also. So my great-grandfather, who had already returned to China, told my grandparents, you better take those kids back to Canada or they're gonna die. So they came back, and it's lucky for me and lucky for my aunts and uncles and cousins too. So now, if we can go on to slide 3, it was my maternal grandparents, yeah, thank you, who had already married when they came to Canada. I never saw my grandmother walk. You can see my grandmother in this slide. She always hobbled, and that was because she had bound feet. In order to come to Canada, she had to unbind her feet, which was equally painful as originally binding her feet. Her husband, you can see him in the corner there, was a university professor, but he became a cook on the ferry up and down the BC coast to earn money to help his family, to feed his family. There is a young boy in this photo also, but he's off the picture, and who became the father of Wei-Sun Choi, author of The Jade Peony and other books. So I'm very thankful to all of my ancestors for making all the sacrifices and coming to Canada so that I can enjoy my life here. So the next slide, please. So yeah, this one, thank you. I was the first baby of Chinese ancestry born at the Langley Memorial Hospital. And I was quite a curiosity with my head full of black hair and this Mongolian spot on my bottom that looked like a bruise. My first home is off the slide, is the Langley. It was a small coffee shop in Langley. And my dad was working in Vancouver. He'd drive to Vancouver, and my mom would be running the coffee shop. My second home is down in the lower left there. You can see kind of shelving of goods. It was a grocery store. We lived in the back of the grocery store, and I was put to work starting at age 5, starting to stock shelves. I remember stocking cigarettes. They're not heavy, and if you drop them, they don't break. And a little bit later, I learned how to take money and count change to customers. The picture at the bottom, you can see kind of a netting and a waitress, is our second another coffee shop. And my mother successfully fought to get a liquor license for beer and wine. And my brother and I are pretending to be served here by our friend, our waitress. She's from Latvia. And the last one was a yellow building. It was a building that my dad had built. It was the first Chinese smorgasbord and cabaret restaurant in Surrey. And my brother and I worked there for many years. So each of these vignettes, I guess, could be fleshed out to become a migration story. So slide 5. I look forward to recording my husband. Yep, this one. Thank you, Sophie. Great. Now we can see the whole thing. Thank you very much. I look forward to sharing my husband's migration story too. That's him in the costume there. He is thriving in the Filipino community here in Vancouver, and he volunteers in many different associations, including mentoring recent accounting immigrants, including performing for Historama. Historama is a multimedia performance of the history of the Philippines told through video, small plays, dance, and music. And PCHC-MoM actually co-sponsored a Historama event at UBC last year. Next slide, please. Another migration story is our daughter-in-law. She and our son met each other when he was teaching in Wuhan, China. There we are. Thank you. They married in China and started the immigration process after our son returned to Canada. And you can see him at the Vancouver International Airport here, under the waiting at the base of the tall claquot welcome figures and greeting her upon her arrival in Vancouver. Her first comment after we were leaving the airport was how clean and fresh the air was. They enjoy outdoor activities, West Coast activities like hiking and snowshoeing, activities that they did not do when they were living in China. Next slide, please, Sophie. This afternoon, my goal was to present some ideas that might resonate with you to tell your migration stories about life in Pacific Canada. Like me, you might not think of yourself as a migrant, then having a migration story, but if you think about it, you really do have such stories. So I challenge you to put together your migration story, or the migration story of a wonderful person you know who has a history here or experience living here on the West Coast now or sometime in the past, and share it. You do not have to do this alone. Last June and July, PCHC Director Henry Yu gave a 2-part webinar from a distance. You can see the poster there, and to help folks get started in telling their stories. And people from across Canada registered. And my 3 takeaways from this were to consider intergenerational stories, 2, to consider a variety of presentation methods. It could be interview. It could be using a special artifact like dance costume or, oops, sorry about that. I can't take that. My migration story was told on a YouTube presentation on PowerPoint, which I narrated through the slides using picture-in-picture and posted up on YouTube. Can I have the next slide, please, Sophie? I really look forward to these upcoming meetings. Oh, that was number 3. Okay, so number 3 is the PCHC is going to develop a supportive community to hold regular discussions and hold workshops to provide us with support as we develop our own migration stories. And I really look forward to these workshops and getting together to meet people who are, gathering their stories, putting them together, having some trouble. We'll discuss it and maybe come up with some solutions and provide encouragement. So we won't feel so isolated as we stay at home and working on our presentations and trying to keep safe from COVID-19. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes. I just want to make sure that we have enough time, right, Coach Ro, for interaction, because the whole idea is that this is such a beautiful platform that Asiatique has built for us. So we should make use of this chance to emphasize the fact that PCHC is not only for people in BC. Wendy,
Yes.
right? You want to talk about the way, oh, you're muted. Okay, so PCHC.
Just for your information, we have 15 minutes more. So please
15 minutes for interaction.
Yes.
Excellent.
1-5, yes.
So because we do not see who is in the room, may we ask people to tell us if you are interested to become storytellers with us, or you want to be organizational partners in support of this whole series we are going to launch officially October the 3rd. Indicate through chat so that we have a way of following up with you. And also, of course, you can contact PCHC. I'm going to send through chat an email where you can indicate you want to talk to individually, some of us, or you want to come on board as a partner or find out more how you can be a partner.
Yes, please use the chat section to express your opinion, and then if you have any information to share, or if you desire to contact people from Vancouver. And I'd like to, from behalf of the festival, like Azim mentioned, that we would like to help you and participate in this process. And if you give us more information about the launching of your project on the 3rd of October, maybe we can participate online. We have had a wonderful experience with Winnie last year in the month of May through a presentation of opera, Chinese opera from Taiwan, and that was fantastic experience. We have had people from all over the world that joined us to watch that opera long for the, I think the duration was about 9 hours. So I think now that we are going through this period of time that the technology is reducing the distances between us, we should use maximum the possibility to bring ourselves together. And one of the main, I would say maybe like the most important element of this symposium is to create this unity among us across the Canada. We are such a great and large country, but we have to overcome the distance, physical distance, and because our stories are, as much as your stories are different, our stories from this side of Canada is different as well. So we have to bring them together. So we have a more collective and full the version of our past, our struggles, and our heritage here in Canada. So I from the Festival XYZ, I express my interest and our interest to be with you throughout this process, and we will do anything we can do to help this project advance. So that's from my side. I believe other people will do the same thing. We will use, as I said, maybe you're aware of following this symposium, what we are going to do is to create a national platform, digital platform, that we can use that digital platform to encourage this discussion and bring it further. We'll give them more information about this the platform later. We did the first study of the questionnaire we passed throughout the country. People expressed what they need. We collected those needs, and according to those needs, we're going to create this new platform. So I'll invite you all to join us during that moment, and then use that platform as well as a means of communication to bring our stories together.
Yes. Khosrow, can people actually ask a question and we can see
their
face?
There is a...
It's on the chat, actually.
I think there's a chat section on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think... Yeah, there's nothing on the Q&A, but there is something in the chat. Winnie. So
yes, I responded to some people, and I am assuming that we can keep whatever is in the chat so that we can follow up unless...
we have 31 people who are attending this conference. So
right, very good.
People that this is very impressed by that. That's great. As I said, this is going to stay after that. This is recorded and will be on our website until the end of October, so people can get in touch. And so if there's any more communication coming, we're going to pick those up and then communicate it with you later.
Yeah, but if you want, Winnie, I think April had a question that you might address. She asked, what is it? She's curious as to what is discussed when people gather for the banquet. Are there specific talking points given? Is it just a general conversation?
So we have developed some guidelines that we send out to all the partners who are going to provide storytellers. We also reach out to individual storytellers. So in the guidelines, we basically kind of prompt them so that they will have a good chance of using the food they are going to share with people as a way, as an entry point. And other people, and we are quite flexible, it's not just food. Some people feel it's too complicated to try to get some of the food they want to share. So they said, can we bring some heirlooms, something important, something significant? And in 2019, Fred John, he brought a whole lot of sketches that he's got of the houses, the old houses in Strathcona. And so that became the background to the table where he was at. Then he brought along a wood block, and there's a big story behind it. And that wood block is from the ancestral hall when he went back to his father's village. And somehow, in a big basket of messy stuff, somebody pulled out one thing, and that happened to be his grandfather's name on this block. So that is a big story that he was sharing with us at that table. And there were other people, like the couple who speak in their dialect, and the son was translating. The son was a baby in the mother's arm when the couple escaped from Vietnam. So they talk about their journey here and their experience settling down. It's very moving. Did I answer the question? I don't want to be the only one speaking. So Sophie, chime in, because you might have a chance to listen in on some of the stories. And Pat, you were actually hosting one of the tables, right? Do you have something to add? You
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yes, the Filipino table, and it was really wonderful to be sharing table with the Filipinos, and with costume and other people you could see in the video with costumes, and sharing the food and learning more about each other's cultures. That we were sharing our culture, or the Filipino culture, and we were learning from people at the same time as they were sharing similar, like noodles, their noodle stories or something like that. So that was great. And I see that May Wong has a note about her book, City in Color. And yes, thank you very much. I just recently read that book, and thank you very much. There's so many stories to share from there, and hopefully we can connect with that.
Yes,
thank you very much.
So glad May is here. She was one of our featured writers who shared stories at our storytelling circles. So that's another programming format that we have tried. So we host regularly storytelling circles where a group of people, like 15 to 20, would be together, and then we'll invite people to share the stories that way. So with COVID, now we try to do it differently. And this is going to be a series which is going to be central and is going to be with us for a long time. And you can help us enrich this format. I know there are a lot of artists here. So one of my intention is if we get this word out, and dancers, musicians, and painters, they can come and say, hey, can we do something together? Now, we have tried to help other museum. Well, we don't look at museums as rivals. We actually look at all of them as potential partners. And so we have had worked with quite a few local museums where we collaborated on curating museum exhibitions to do with missing stories, missing histories, as well as migration stories. And we animate. We're very good at animating exhibitions. So we'll bring in people there So I've worked with musicians who can animate some of these things. But if one of the dancers here have an idea, hey, if you have these stories, I like to translate the stories or complement the stories with my kind of artistic expression, right? So those are the exciting things that I'm looking forward to seeing happen.
So actually, I'm just sort of been looking. Oh, Raymond, can I just jump in for 1 second? Because I saw there were some questions, and I'm not sure that we fully covered it. I do think there was one question about, I think from Kaylee about, you know, do we have to charge? And I guess if it's a very small thing, it's a potluck, you probably don't. I mean, that's really, I think, up to you how you want to do it as an organization. But then there is sort of another proposal there, like how can we do this and tie in with supporting our restaurants? Because of course we all know that that's a problem. And there's a lot of things that could be done on that. I will just share that the Indian Summer Festival about a month ago, they have their 10th anniversary of where they're sharing South Asian culture and had really fascinating things. So they went online this year and they had it over a series of 10 weeks. But their gala, they actually organized a restaurant or caterer to basically, you know, you signed up for it and they delivered the food to you.
Oh, wow.
And then they had, you know, the party as a Zoom. Okay, which was really interesting. And so then they had, you know, some of the performances, and then they sort of had a chat room for the after party, which I really couldn't, it was getting long. And that might have been a little awkward. It might have loosened up later, but they were trying to do this dance party. That's a little trickier, I think. But it was, you know, it was an effort, you know, like to have that after party and some music. But I think it's hard for you like to dance in your room with by yourself and seeing other people on the screen.
In fact, we tried it last night and it worked. Yeah. We had about 45 seconds of music and we all got up and danced and everything.
I think
and some people were asking for more. Like, 45 seconds is
I think you have to choreograph it or like arrange it. I think it was
exactly.
It was just like a DJ, and it looked great where they were, but they were on a balcony and we weren't. So, you know, but the food I thought was really
that was fantastic idea.
We could do that and maybe do a series and have restaurants, or even do something where we do it together. And we had in each city that you could just organize, you know, for each organization, they do something. And it was a bit of a fundraiser, of course, too, you know, but if you didn't order the food, the content was free, so that at least people could participate, you know, irregardless of the cost. So that was sort of an interesting format, I thought, and, you know, a sort of a nice way to get around this social distancing. So anyway,
just to supplement what Wendy said, for the Banquet of Stories, we decided that it's important that we have a good idea how many people will show up, because there's a capacity issue always. So we decided we'll charge $5. People have to sign up on Eventbrite. And we typically would be able to monitor how many people are already there. This is really a token to make sure that people take it seriously, because $5 is not even enough to pay for the rent of the hall.
Yes, of course.
We are able to do it because of the generosity of all our partners and our volunteers. And so people are very happy to pay the $5. And then for the storytellers and the partners, we give them tickets to come in. Of course, we don't charge them. So when we had about 200 some people in the big hall, we got maybe about a few $100, $300, which is good. So you can do it in different ways. We just find that charging a token fee helps to give you a better sense of whether you need to push it more or you need to stop and tell people, don't just show up because we cannot let you in. It's full already.
Well, thank you very much, Winnie. I guess we are just about to finish.
But Raymond had a question. I don't know if we can get to Raymond.
What we can do is we can collect all the questions and then send it to you, because I think in 30 seconds we'll be cut off, so that we can continue exchanging through the emails or the social medias. It was a wonderful evening. I really enjoyed all this good news, and hopefully we'll be working together in the future to advance this fantastic project. So I thank you again for participating in our symposium. Looking forward, we are hoping the next symposium will be in Vancouver. So we will come hopefully there in the next couple of years. So
we'll have a banquet. banquet of stories and real food.
Yes, we're looking forward
thank
to
you. We'll follow up with all the people's email and so on.
Yes, and we're going to
Thank you
have
very
that
much
platform
for
soon, and then
participating
on the platform we can continue